Heyo, I'm back to take a look at some more Stephen King movies. You know, movies based on the work by Stephen King. And I got quite some reactions on the first video where I stated that I won't be including the made-for-TV material. But I still stand by that. Really, for now, I just want to focus on the feature films that actually play the theaters. You know, otherwise this series is going to be way too long. And, you know, after I've covered all the feature films, I could always take an extra look at some of the made-for-TV material. Right? Yes, so that means that after Christine, the movie that we finished the first part with, we are now in 1984 to take a look at Children of the Corn. Ah, you just gotta love that name, Children of the Corn. It's a great name. Also, Big Al's hip-hop group.
Hey, yo, I'm set for the rest of my life. Some clown that laid the threat cause I had sex with his wife.
Remember that? But first, the movie. Which starts with a blast, as we see a bunch of kids killing all the adults at this little diner. It's not super gory, you know, visually, but still pretty brutal. The story comes together when Sarah Connor here and her boyfriend are driving around, you know, minding their own business, hitting little kids on their way. Boom! But they soon realize that, well, they didn't really kill the boy. And, you know, there's something fishy going on. And then, while looking for help, they eventually roll into this small, seemingly deserted town. But, I don't know what it is, but I actually quite like this one. I mean, it's not even all that well made. It was the directorial debut of Fritz Kiers. No idea who that is. But somehow it's still quite memorable. Like the two main bad guys, or kids, Isaac and Malachi, it's quite memorable.
Outlander!
Ah, damn, Malachi. It's a pretty cool name though. Plus, and that just really helps the movie a lot for me, I simply love the theme of this folk or cult aspects in any horror movie, and I always believe that they did a pretty decent job in depicting that in this movie, in Children of the Corn. It manages to create quite a little bit of atmosphere, also with the whole deserted town look, and well, definitely the soundtrack as well. It's pretty damn cool. If anything, I wish it was a little gorier. I don't know, I feel like that could have worked in this movie. Also, spoiler alert, a little bit, I'm not too keen on the whole supernatural aspect towards the end of the movie, but hey, can't have everything, right? Still, pretty cool stuff. And it's not even all the nostalgia speaking here, because most from what I remember from this movie is you know, from seeing it when I was a little older already. I own the movie as part of the original trilogy in this pretty cool DVD box set. Look at that. Because, yeah, of course this movie had like 1 million sequels. And a remake. Although that could also just be another adaptation. I mean, this 1984 version, Children of the Corn, that we just talked about, that wasn't even the first one, since a low-budget short movie adaptation was made the year before. Oh well, enough about that. Because, well, only some 2 months later, we saw the release of Firestarter, another Stephen King adaptation. Obviously, since we're doing this series. But yeah, let's take a look. Because boom, Firestarter, and we started right in the action with this guy and his daughter fleeing from these guys in their suits. What happened? Well, I'll tell you. Well, unless you want to find out yourself while watching this movie, in that case, skip it. Because, yeah, this guy, he partook in some medical experiments and now he has telekinetic powers, of course. And then he had a daughter with this chick from the same experiment, and then of course their little girl is a so-called Firestarter. Which means that she can start fire. And now the shop, that is Stephen King's evil government agency, is after them because they want to use the girl's power as a weapon. It's pretty intense, right? And did you see that? Pretty cool cast as well. A very young Drew Barrymore and a pretty young Heather Locklear in her first movie actually. Man, she's beautiful. Also a relatively young Martin Sheen in his second King movie already. And a younger and alive George C. Scott in a very amusing role. Like I said, it's a pretty cool cast. But, I don't know, it doesn't really save the movie. I mean, I like the concept, but the movie feels very average. The scenes in which our little Firestarter starts fire, they're pretty cool. Especially here, where she fights off this entire squad of bad guys. I mean, that's pretty badass. As well as, well, like I said just now, George C. Scott's character, whenever he was in the scene, I mostly enjoyed it. But still, at close to 2 hours, I don't know, it just ran a little too long to keep my complete interest. But hey, spoiler alert, the ending was pretty cool. Very Carrie-ish, you know, where the girl goes berserk, destroying everything. At least the movie goes out with a bang. But still, definitely not my favorite King adaptation so far. I haven't read the novel, so I don't know how it compares. That's, I guess, where you guys have to help me. And then, in the meantime, I'll take a look at Silver Bullet. As the title sort of suggests, it's a werewolf movie. Because, you know, those were kind of popular again in the early 80s with movies like An American Werewolf in London and The Howling. So yeah, let's take a look. Like Firestarter, I had never seen this one before, but I ended up liking it quite a bit. The movie mostly plays like just your average 80s slasher flick, but instead of a psycho killer, we have a werewolf. So that means, of course, there are quite some killings, and they were actually pretty brutal. Oh, yeah, this movie was definitely more graphic than I expected. That was a nice surprise. So, we follow this little boy who is paralyzed and is racing around in his pimped out Silver Bullet wheelchair. How conveniently named. He also has no problem explaining all the killings that are going on.
Well, what if it's some kind of monster? You know, like a werewolf or something.
That kid's a pro. All of this, of course, is unbeknownst to the townsfolk on the other side of the town who decide to go get the killer by turning into a lynch mob like it's the late 1800s. Still, it's quite a weird coincidence that they think that the killer lives in the forest. But yeah, that's what we get, and it all works pretty well. They do a good job at not revealing too much of the monster, and while it ain't no American Werewolf in London, the transformation scene is still pretty fun, you know, in a kind of cheesy way. In general, this movie is just quite a lot of fun. Gary Busey, he plays this alcoholic uncle who's actually a pretty good guy. He gives quite an entertaining performance. Maybe it all just has to do with the fact that this is the first movie where Stephen King himself adapted his work for the screen. Or maybe first and only time feature film director Daniel Athias, whatever his name is, maybe he just got lucky. Originally, Don Coscarelli was brought on to direct. Coscarelli, of course, best known for his Phantasm movies. Rest in peace, Angus Scrimm. But he couldn't come to an agreement with the producer, you know, that happens. Anyway, that's all a little off topic, but I don't really know what to say. Just check it out. I thought it was quite a lot of fun. Yeah, it sure was. I know I didn't really go too much in depth into this movie, you know, during this review just now. Mostly because there really isn't too much to really go in depth into. But also, you know, just check it out if you haven't already. I mean, you shouldn't expect a masterpiece or anything, but I'm pretty sure you'll enjoy it. So, from the first screenplay by Stephen King, we now take a look at the first and only directorial effort by Stephen King. Maximum Overdrive. Oh yeah, well, let's waste no time and dive right in. Not because it's such a sophisticated story, because it's quite the opposite. In fact, they almost completely explain the whole story in the first still. Planet Earth is in the tail of this comet, and because of that, every machine on Earth starts operating on itself and goes crazy. That's it. It's a pretty lame story, but at the same time, it's actually kinda cool. And what kinda makes this movie is just a bunch of cool sequences where the machinery takes over. Like for example, when this bridge starts to open mid-traffic. that's actually the opening scene to the movie, and it's pretty spectacular. Or later in the movie where this vending machine starts to shoot out cans. It's fun stuff. The story focuses, however, on this group of people that lock themselves inside this gas stop diner thing, trying to protect themselves from these big rigs that are going crazy. The whole movie seems kinda intentionally campy, and one could argue that it is a black, you know, like a dark comedy. I mean, it's kinda funny, in a ridiculous way. My biggest problem with this movie, however, is that, you know, as a whole, it's just not that interesting. I mean, sure, it has some pretty cool, like, you know, like separate sequences, but for some reason, for me, it just doesn't all add up. What helps for a lot of people is the soundtrack, consisting completely out of AC/DC tracks. A problem here is, however, that I personally don't really care for AC/DC, or, you know, like for 80s rock in general. I know, right? Please don't burn me. But yeah, besides some fun action set pieces, the movie is a mess. Stephen King himself, who you see here in his first cameo actually during the series, he was coked out during production and apparently had no idea what he was doing. Explains a lot. Also, apparently he doesn't care for this movie like at all. Understandable, but then again, he shouldn't be too hard on himself. Because really, some of the separate sequences, they were actually pretty cool, and you know, because of that, it might be worth checking out. It's just, like I said before, the movie as a whole is just not that great. But that is why I'm happy with the next movie, and that's also what I like about this series, you know, that we can take a little break from all the horror and take a look at a movie like Stand By Me. Ah, Stand By Me. What a movie. As always, let's waste no time and let's check this one out. Directed by Rob Reiner, who made a name for himself with the classic mockumentary This Is Spinal Tap, and who we will also see again later during this series, Stand By Me tells the simple story of 4 friends that go out and look for the dead body of a young boy that went missing. And it's not just any 4 friends. Well, they kinda are, but the actors playing them, they mostly grew into quite a career. Will Wheaton, River Phoenix, Corey Feldman and Jerry O'Connell. We even get to see a young Kiefer Sutherland. I hated his character though, but then again, I guess I was supposed to. Anyway, this movie, its story, and well, presumably the novella it's based on, it's really like a love letter to childhood and childhood friendships. It just oozes nostalgia. And even though it's set decades before I was even born, it's still relatable for me. The acting, which for me ranged from pretty good to doesn't even really matter. The way the kids talk and act and, you know, their different personalities, it just feels natural, you know, realistic, sincerely. The subplot of the main character's home situation, where his older brother died a couple of months ago, it works pretty well and adds a nice extra layer to the whole story. Also, the whole 50s and 60s soundtrack is really fitting. Obviously, perhaps, but still, it's a great selection of songs. Oh man, it's hard to really do this movie justice with just such a review. I don't know, this movie just evokes a certain type of feeling in me, which is hard to describe or explain. It's a bit of a combination between perhaps, you know, like nostalgia or melancholy, but at the same time it's also quite uplifting. It may seem like I'm just throwing in words now, but you know, maybe you understand what I'm trying to say. Although what I'm actually trying to say is, just check it out for yourself if you haven't already. Like, I really recommend this one. I almost can't imagine someone not liking this one. Really? I mean, if I had to, I could find like 1 or 2 things that I wouldn't mind, you know, seeing a little different in the movie. But then I would really just be nitpicking and, well, this is not the time for that. So yeah, Stand By Me, highly recommended. And yes, you also get to hear the song. Booyah! And that brings us to the end of this video. Thoughts, questions, complaints? Leave them in the comments below and, you know, I'll try to get back at you. I do hope you enjoyed this video and you know, this series so far, because hey, there's definitely more parts coming. So yeah, let me know. You guys have a nice day and see you next time.